During my parents' 40th anniversary celebration, my elder brother seized the microphone and proclaimed, "Let's raise a glass to Mom and Dad for their tolerance towards their second son, the one who left medical school and still resides in their basement at 35. Laughter erupted, and everyone pointed at me. I was infuriated. Yet I managed to force a smile while my hands trembled beneath the table. For 2 months I kept silent. Yesterday morning, my phone incessantly rang. I had been sitting here for nearly an hour, trying to find the right way to begin this. My hands are still quaking as I write this. I suppose I'll just get straight to it. 2 months ago, my parents marked their 40th anniversary, an important milestone for everyone, right? They reserved a mid-range restaurant in our hometown. It wasn't extravagant, but nice enough that everyone dressed up beyond jeans. Mom, Betty, spent weeks fixating on every detail, wanting to impress her church friends. Dad, Walker, simply nodded along as usual. I almost didn't attend, seriously contemplating pretending to have a stomach bug or something. Being the family disappointment becomes tiring when everyone gathers in one place, gazing at you. But I went because, well, 40 years is significant, and despite all the nonsense, I do love my parents. For context, I'm 35. Yes, I live in my parents' basement. And yes, I left medical school 7 years ago after experiencing what my therapist diplomatically terms a major mental health crisis. Translation: a complete breakdown during finals. I've been working at a local hardware store while trying to sort my life out. Not exactly the American dream, but at least I'm not addicted to drugs or in jail. My brother Henry, on the other hand, is the golden child. Literally can't miss. He's a financial advisor with his own firm, owns a massive house in the affluent part of town, and has a perfect wife, Aleliana, who boasts around 50,000 followers on Instagram, showcasing their not authentic family journey. They have 2 kids who are obviously being groomed for Harvard. The party kicked off well, with everyone mingling and enjoying those tiny appetizers that never satisfy your hunger. I stayed in the corner, sipping a beer and making small talk with my cousin, the only one who treats me like a regular person. Mom kept sending me looks across the room. "Half Dewey, I'm glad you're here. You and half Maz, please don't embarrass us." I'm accustomed to those gazes. After dinner, Dad stood up to deliver his speech about their marriage, standard, fair about love and partnership, blah blah. Mom cried right on cue, and people applauded, all according to plan. Then Henry stood up and took the microphone. "I'd like to say something to her," he said, flashing that perfect smile that likely costs more than my monthly rent. Everyone turned to him naturally. He began discussing family values and what our parents taught us, and I zoned out until he suddenly focused directly on me. "Let's raise a glass to Mom and Dad for their patience with their second son, the one who dropped out of medical school and still lives in their basement at 35. The room erupted in laughter, every single person mirthful. Someone pointed at me, then others joined in. Mum's face exhibited that look where she attempted to appear disapproving but was genuinely amused. Dad stared down at his plate, and my cousin mumbled, "That's messed up," but didn't say anything louder. I don't recall precisely what transpired next. My face felt so hot I thought I might faint. My hands shook so violently I pressed them against my thighs. Someone patted my shoulder as if it were a shared joke. I forced the most phony smile of my life as Henry concluded his amusing toast with something about family sticking together through thick and thin. The rest of the night is a blur of evasion. I remember hiding in the bathroom, scrolling through Reddit for 20 minutes. I recall Mum's friend asking if I had any prospects with a pitying look. I wondered how much trouble I'd be in if I accidentally spilled my drink on Henry's ridiculously pricey shoes. I drove home alone. Everyone else stayed for the after party. As soon as I reached my car, I screamed. A primal scream that probably startled everyone in the parking lot. Then I cried like I hadn't since I left medical school. Ugly, snotty tears while pounding on my steering wheel. The thing is, this wasn't new. Henry had been doing this my entire life. When we were kids, he'd wait until friends visited to mention how I wet the bed until I was 9. In high school, he'd casually bring up my rejection letters in front of his friends. When I got into med school, he began joking about how I'd end up killing my first patient. It never ceased. And my parents always gave me those pitying smiles afterward. The "we love you anyway" looks that truly meant "we're disappointed but trying not to show it." They never stood up for me, not once. I arrived home before everyone else and lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling of my basement apartment. Let's be real. It's just a finished basement with a bathroom. I could hear them all returning later, laughing and chatting. Mom came down to check on me, but I pretended to be asleep. That night, I resolved that something had to change. Not some vague fantasy of, I'll show them someday, but something concrete. The next morning was Sunday brunch, a mandatory family tradition my mom insists on. Usually, I feign illness, but that day, I decided to attend. I needed to see Henry's smug face in the daylight, to remind myself why I was so angry. That's when I overheard something intriguing. As I was pouring orange juice from the fridge, I caught Henry and his business partner Baylor on the back deck, unaware of my presence. They spoke in hushed tones, but the window was open. "The Johnson account is getting complicated," Baylor remarked. "The old man's daughter is asking questions about the allocation. She doesn't comprehend the paperwork." Henry replied, "Just reschedule the meeting until after the Williams transfer clears. We'll have it sorted by then. And if she brings her lawyer like she threatened..." "Jesus, Baylor, do I have to think of everything? Tell her I'm taking a personal day. Family emergency or something. We just need 2 more weeks." It didn't sound right. Even with my limited knowledge, shifting clients' money around to cover other accounts seemed shady. I quietly took out my phone and began recording. They talked for another 10 minutes about asset movement, temporary allocations, and other increasingly questionable matters. When I returned to the dining room, Henry greeted me with that same condescending grin from the party. Look who decided to join the land of the living. Everyone chuckled, and I merely glared at him, seeing him in a new light. After brunch, I did something I hadn't done in years. I visited the local coffee shop and opened my laptop, starting to research financial regulations and investment advisor requirements. 7 hours and 6 overpriced lattes later, I confirmed my suspicions. Henry was doing some seriously dubious things with his clients' funds. I also stumbled upon Leliana's Instagram. Amidst the perfect family pictures and hashtagged blessed, captions were subtle hints of trouble, passive-aggressive, posts about partners being present, comments from friends saying stay strong, the kind of social media, cries for help people make when their lives are crumbling. But they're trying to maintain an image. Over the following week, I dug deeper, using my status as a basement dweller as cover. Nobody questioned why the family disappointment spent the entire day online. I discovered Henry had been siphoning funds from elderly clients to finance his personal investments, guaranteeing returns he couldn't deliver, a classic Ponzi-adjacent scheme. He was also apparently having an affair with someone from his gym, based on some spicy DMs I found when I borrowed his tablet while he was swimming in Mum and Dad's pool. I could have exposed him immediately, posted everything online, alerted his clients, told Leliana, but something inside me craved more. I wanted him to experience what I had felt at that party, complete and utter humiliation, with nowhere to hide. So I began planning meticulously. Employing the analytical skills that once made me a promising med student, I created a timeline, gathered evidence, and identified vulnerabilities. For once, being invisible to my family worked in my favor. Nobody noticed me taking photos of documents Henry left lying around, and nobody questioned my sudden interest in financial news. Now 2 months have passed, 2 months of feigning smiles during family dinners while Henry continued to make his little jabs about my failed career. 2 months of orchestrating the perfect moment. 2 months of anticipation leading up to the anniversary of my humiliation. Tomorrow is the big day. Henry will receive an industry award at a fancy ceremony. Everyone will be there, his clients, his colleagues. Leliana broadcasting it all over her social media. Mum and Dad are so proud, bragging to everyone at church. Everything is set. The evidence is organized, the emails scheduled. The truth is packaged and ready to be delivered to precisely the right people at the right time. As I finalize the last details tonight, I keep hearing his voice in my head. Let's raise a glass to Mom and Dad for their patience with their second son. For the first time in 2 months, that memory doesn't make my hands tremble. It brings a smile because by this time tomorrow, Henry's perfect life is going to implode spectacularly, and I will witness it all while sipping on the same champagne they drank when they laughed at me. I'll provide an update tomorrow after it all unfolds. Wish me luck, Reddit. TL. DR. My flawless brother publicly humiliated me at our parents' anniversary party. I discovered he's been engaging in shady activities with clients' money and cheating on his wife. Instead of exposing him immediately, I've spent 2 months planning the perfect revenge that will shatter his pristine image tomorrow. Update 1. Wow, I did not anticipate this level of response. For those asking if I'm truly going through with it, this update will clarify that. The morning after I posted part 1, I awoke to my mum knocking on my basement door. She'd prepared my favorite breakfast, blueberry, pancakes, and wanted to know if I was feeling okay since I seemed different lately. Translation, she was concerned. I was spiraling again like during the med school fiasco. Perfect timing, honestly. I played the role of the somewhat damaged but recovering son, telling her I was feeling better than I had in years, that I was applying for jobs and contemplating moving out soon. Her face lit up so quickly, I almost felt guilty about my plans. Almost. Here's the thing about being the family. Disappointment. People stop observing you closely. They check in occasionally to ensure you're not completely falling apart, but they don't pay attention to what you're actually doing. It's like being invisible in plain sight. For the past 2 months, I've leveraged that invisibility as a superpower. In the first week following the anniversary debacle, I established my routine. Mornings at the local library using their computers, instead of my own, thanks to a commenter who pointed out that IP addresses can be traced. Smart thinking. Afternoons working at the hardware store, and evenings job hunting, which essentially meant building my case against Henry in the basement. Nobody questioned it because it fit their image of me trying to get my life together. My first significant move was reaching out to Eleliana. This was trickier than anticipated. We've never been close. She's always treated me with that special kind of pity reserved for her husband's loser brother. However, I had noticed something during family dinners over the past year. She kept mentioning these stress headaches she was experiencing. Remember how I said I dropped out of med school? Well, it wasn't due to a lack of intelligence. I left because of anxiety and depression that culminated in a full-blown breakdown during finals. But I still recall a lot of what I learned, especially regarding common stress symptoms and treatments. So I coincidentally ran into her at Target one afternoon. She was in the pharmacy aisle contemplating various pain relievers. I casually mentioned that ibuprofen could cause rebound headaches with overuse and suggested a different combination that might alleviate her symptoms. The medical jargon caught her off guard. People forget I was actually good at the doctor stuff before I fell apart. That conversation transitioned into coffee, which evolved into regular texts about her health issues. Within 2 weeks, I became her go-to source for medical advice. She began confiding in me about other matters, how stressed she was maintaining her social media presence, how the kids struggled with their packed schedules, and how Henry was working late increasingly. I played my part flawlessly, offering a sympathetic ear without judgment, just a concerned brother-in-law with time to listen. No real responsibilities in my basement existence. Every conversation was a treasure trove of information. I recorded nothing, but I remembered everything. Meanwhile, I was working on Henry's business angle. This was more challenging, since I couldn't just walk into his office. But family gatherings became opportunities for intelligence gathering. I would purposely bring up topics that might get Henry discussing work, innocently asking questions about investment strategies. Once, I even pretended to be interested in investing my savings, LOL, and got him to explain his approach to client management. The real breakthrough occurred when I volunteered to assist my parents with their computer issues. Dad had been complaining about email issues for weeks. While fixing things, I set up forwarding for any emails from Henry to also go to a disposable account I created. Morally questionable? Perhaps, but I wasn't altering anything, just observing what Henry was already sending them. That's how I discovered Henry had been borrowing money from my parents, not asking for loans, but actually shifting funds from their retirement accounts that he managed. The emails were meticulously worded, but it was evident he was using their money to cover his business expenses, promising returns that hadn't materialized. 3 weeks in, I hit another goldmine. Henry left his laptop at my parents' house after rushing out post-Sunday dinner. He forgot to log out of his email. I had about 20 minutes before someone noticed. My hands trembled as I quickly forwarded key emails to my burner account and took screenshots of his calendar. That's when I stumbled upon emails between Henry and someone named Kylie. Initially, I thought she might be a client, but she wasn't. The messages began professionally, but quickly turned personal, then sexual. I felt gross reading them, but also vindicated. Perfect family man. Henry was having an affair with a colleague. However, the biggest revelation came from his meeting schedule. Henry had been meeting repeatedly with the same 4 elderly clients: the Wilsons, the Johnsons, the Parkers, and Mrs. Yamamoto, cross-referencing with other emails. I realized these were affluent clients whose accounts Henry had been using to cover losses from other investments. A classic Ponzi-adjacent scheme, just as I suspected. By month 2, I had amassed enough evidence to completely dismantle Henry's career, but I wanted more. I sought to understand why he turned out this way, why he felt the need to belittle me to elevate himself, and why our parents continually allowed it to happen. So I took a risk and started asking questions, not direct accusations, but casual inquiries to my mum about whether she thought Henry seemed stressed lately, and mentioning to my dad that I had overheard Henry arguing over the phone about finances. Small comments aimed at gauging their reactions. What I learned was both surprising and sadly predictable. Mom revealed that Henry had always envied how effortlessly academics came to me during our youth, that before my issues began, teachers had consistently remarked that I was the one with real potential. Dad, somewhat reluctantly, admitted that Henry had struggled with substantial student loans and had made some aggressive investments early in his career that hadn't paid off. They weren't excusing his behavior precisely, but they were providing explanations, and in doing so, acknowledging they knew Henry could be cruel to me. They just chose to overlook it because addressing it would mean confronting the fact that their perfect son wasn't so perfect. That conversation occurred 2 weeks ago, leaving me feeling empty but more determined than ever. Not just to expose Henry, but to compel my parents to recognize what they had enabled all these years. The final phase involved 3 careful preparations. First, I compiled 3 separate evidence packages, one for my parents, detailing how Henry had mishandled their retirement funds, one for Leliana, containing carefully selected screenshots of Henry's affair, not the graphic material, just enough to prove it was happening, and one comprehensive file for Henry's business partners and key clients, documenting the pattern of financial mismanagement. Second, I arranged a fake job interview for myself in a town 2 hours away, scheduled for the morning of Henry's awards ceremony, the perfect alibi for why I wouldn't be present when everything blew up. Mom was so thrilled about the interview, she didn't question the timing. Third, I had the most arduous conversation of my life with my parents last night. I sat them down and revealed that I knew what Henry had been doing with their money. I didn't disclose my entire plan, just enough to make them understand their golden child had been exploiting them. Mom cried. Dad got angry, then fell silent. They didn't want to believe me, but the evidence was there in black and white. Transfers from their accounts that they hadn't authorized. Falsified return statements. I left them with a choice. They could confront Henry themselves before his big ceremony, or I would ensure everyone was aware of what he'd been doing. I didn't threaten or yell, just presented the facts and walked away. For the first time in my adult life, I saw them look at me with something other than disappointment. This morning I woke up early, packed a small bag for my job interview, and set up the scheduled emails to deliver the remaining evidence packages, precisely at 2 p.m., right when Henry would be on stage accepting his award. As I was about to leave, I overheard my parents arguing upstairs. Dad insisted they needed to call Henry immediately, while Mum suggested they should wait until after the ceremony. Neither of them realized the full extent of what was coming. I left the house feeling oddly calm, drove to a coffee shop in the next town over, ordered a large coffee, and opened my laptop. Then I waited. At exactly 2 p.m., my phone began blowing up. First a text from Leliana, just a series of question marks. Then calls from my parents, then Henry repeatedly. I watched the notifications accumulate without responding. At 2:15, Leliana went live on Instagram from the award venue. Her face was streaked with tears as she began discussing betrayal and deceit to her. 50,000 followers. In the background, I could see Henry attempting to grab her phone while people stared in shock. By 2:30, Henry's business partner Baylor was calling me. Funny, he'd never contacted me before in his life. Google alerts I'd set up for Henry's name began pinging. Someone at the ceremony was live tweeting the meltdown. I'm sitting here now, still in that coffee shop, observing it all unfold from a safe distance. Henry's perfect life is collapsing in real time. And all I had to do was expose the truth he'd been concealing. The strangest part? I don't feel as triumphant as I anticipated. There's satisfaction, yes, but also a weight in my chest. Not regret precisely. More like the acknowledgement that this won't resolve everything. It won't erase years of being the family disappointment or heal all those wounds. But it's a start. My phone continues to buzz. I should probably answer eventually, but for now, I'm just sitting here watching the notifications pile up, pondering how Henry must be feeling. Is he trembling like I was at that anniversary dinner? Is he forcing a smile while everyone stares? God, I hope so. I'll provide another update after I return home and face the aftermath. This is merely the beginning. TLDR, spent 2 months gathering evidence of my brother's affair and financial misdeeds. Set everything up to explode during his significant award ceremony. Now watching from a distance as his perfect life crumbles. Final update. Last night, I didn't sleep at all. I merely stared at my phone as notifications accumulated like casualties in a disaster. I moved through 37 missed calls and 62 text messages, the digital fallout of a nuclear explosion. I had meticulously engineered. Around 3 a.m., I finally turned my phone off completely and sat in the darkness of my motel room. Yeah, I didn't return home after the coffee shop too. Foolish for that, and just breathed. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, I felt an odd lightness in my chest. Not happiness exactly, but space to exist without the constant burden of being the disappointment. I switched my phone back on at 7 a.m. and found 5 new voicemails from Henry, each more unhinged than the last. The final one was just heavy breathing and what seemed like sobbing. Part of me wanted to save it as my new ringtone. The rest felt empty. My parents had texted repeatedly, inquiring about my whereabouts, if I was safe, when I'd be home. Nothing concerning Henry or what had transpired. Classic Betty and Walker, avoiding the elephant in the room until it literally tramples someone to death. The most surprising message came from Liliana. Just 3 words. We need to talk. No anger, no accusations, just that simple request lingering in digital space. I checked some messages from people who'd attended the ceremony. Apparently, Henry lunged for Liliana's phone during her Instagram live, knocking over a glass of water, while his business partner Baylor physically restrained him, all while people watched in disbelief. I showered, packed an overnight bag, and checked out of the motel. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, contemplating where to go. Not home, not yet. Eventually, I drove to the local diner where I used to study during med school. I ordered coffee and eggs, trying to appear like a normal person whose life wasn't simultaneously imploding. That's when my phone rang again. Mom. I almost didn't answer, but something within me had shifted. I wasn't hiding anymore. She was crying before I even greeted her, rambling about how Henry had been arrested. Arrested? That wasn't part of my plan. Apparently, one of his elderly clients had promptly contacted the authorities after receiving my evidence package. Something about Henry already being under investigation for financial irregularities. The police had been waiting for solid evidence, and I'd gift-wrapped it for them. Mom kept asking if I knew if this was what I wanted, why I would do this to the family. Not once did she inquire why Henry had acted as he did. I let her finish, then simply stated I was heading home, and we would discuss it there. The drive back felt surreal. It was as if I were floating above myself, watching someone else navigate traffic. I kept expecting regret or guilt to wash over me, but it never came. Only a strange, calm certainty that I had done what needed to be done. Upon pulling into the driveway, Dad was waiting on the porch. He looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen him. Shoulders hunched, face grey. He didn't speak as I approached, simply opened the door and motioned for me to enter. Mom was at the kitchen table, surrounded by tissues, scrolling through messages from family friends, who'd somehow already heard about what happened. Word travels quickly in a tight-knit community, even without making headlines. The 3 of us sat in silence for what felt like hours. Finally, Dad spoke, asking why I hadn't just approached them with what I knew about Henry. Why the public humiliation? Why destroy everything in one day? I laughed, actually laughed out loud, asking if he remembered the anniversary party. If he recalled doing nothing while Henry embarrassed me in front of everyone we knew. If he remembered every family gathering where Henry's jokes about my failures went unchallenged. Mom began crying again and Dad stared at his hands. In that moment, it became clear. They weren't angry about what I had done. They were furious I had forced them to confront what they had been ignoring for years. I was about to say more when the front door slammed. Open, Henry. His perfect hair was disheveled, tie loose around his neck, eyes wild in a way I had never witnessed before. He'd evidently been released on bail. He saw me and lunged, literally lunged across the room like some animal. Dad barely caught him before he reached me, shouting about how I had ruined everything, how I had always been jealous, how I would never amount to anything. I just stood there, unflinching, not backing away, looking him directly in the eyes and said, "At least I never stole from elderly people or cheated on my wife." He broke down, collapsing against Dad, sobbing about how it wasn't supposed to be like this, how he just needed a little more time to fix his investments, how Kylie didn't mean anything, how he felt trapped by the perfect life everyone expected. In that moment, watching my brother crumpled on our parents' kitchen floor, I had a bizarre realization. Henry was just as messed up as I was, maybe more. He had just been better at concealing it. Mom insisted we all sit down and made tea nobody wanted, attempting to mediate as if this was some childhood squabble over a toy and not the complete collapse of our family dynamic. It was so absurd I nearly laughed again. Henry wouldn't look at me, addressing everything to our parents as though I weren't present. He said he would fix everything, get a good lawyer, make amends with Liliana, and restore his business reputation. Finally, Dad interrupted him, raising his hand and declaring, "Enough, Henry!" It was the first time I had ever heard him speak to the golden child with anything less than admiration. "You stole from us, from your clients. You lied to everyone." The silence following that declaration was deafening. My phone buzzed, a text from Leliana. "I'm outside." I excused myself and stepped onto the front porch. She was seated in her lavish SUV, sunglasses concealing what I assumed were puffy eyes. I got in, and we sat silently for a moment before she handed me her phone. On the screen was a text exchange between her and Henry from months ago. She had suspected the affair and confronted him. He had gaslit her, making her feel insane and paranoid, convincing her she was the problem in their marriage. She wasn't crying or yelling, just sitting there with eerie calmness, asking what else I knew, what else Henry had been hiding. I told her everything, the financial misconduct, the manipulations, all of it. By the end, she was nodding as though confirming a diagnosis she had already suspected. Before exiting the car, she thanked me for detonating her marriage. She said she had felt like she was going mad for months, questioning her perception, and stated that the truth, however painful, was preferable to living a lie. When I returned indoors, Henry was gone. Mom informed me he had left to consult his lawyer, while Dad was making calls to their bank to assess the damage to their retirement accounts. I descended to my basement room and began packing. Not everything, just enough for a few days. I needed space to think, to process what had transpired and what lay ahead. As I zipped up my bag, Dad appeared at the bottom of the stairs looking lost, standing in the doorway to the room I had occupied as an adult for far too long. He asked where I was going. I said I didn't know yet, just that I couldn't remain there for the time being. Then he did something entirely unexpected. He apologized, not just for today or for the anniversary, but for years of allowing Henry's behavior, for failing to see what was happening between his sons, for failing both of us in different ways. It wasn't a movie moment. He didn't cry or hug me, or suddenly morph into Father of the Year. He was just a weary old man, finally acknowledging a truth he had been avoiding for decades. I nodded, not yet ready to forgive, but recognizing the effort it took him to say it. That was yesterday. Today, I woke up in another motel room, checked my phone, and discovered the situation continuing to unfold in our small circle. Henry's company had issued a statement to clients, temporarily relieving him of his duties pending investigation. Leliana had filed for emergency custody of their children. I spent the day ignoring calls and contemplating what comes next. The revenge is complete, but I don't feel the victory I anticipated. Instead, there's this strange emptiness, as if I've run a marathon for years and suddenly crossed an unforeseen finish line. One thing is clear though, I can't return to the basement. I can't revert to being the disappointment. That version of me died the moment I chose to fight back. I just got off the phone with my cousin, the only family member who has ever treated me with kindness. He offered his spare room while I sought things out, and said he was proud of me for standing up for myself. Even if the method was nuclear-level petty, it made me chuckle for the first time in days. Henry texted once today, "I hope you're happy now." I didn't reply. There's nothing left to say between us. Mom continues sending links to family therapy options, while Dad hasn't reached out at all. The family group chat, once buzzing with Henry's accomplishments and my conspicuous absence, is now utterly silent. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if our family can recover from this, or if we're permanently fractured. I don't know if Henry will face real consequences, or if money and privilege will shield him once again. All I know is that I'm not trembling anymore. My hands are steady as I type this. The basement dweller, the med school dropout, the family disappointment, he's gone. I'm someone else now, someone who fought back. Perhaps that's enough for now. TLDR. My brother was arrested after my evidence unveiled his financial crimes. I confronted my parents and brother, while my sister-in-law thanked me for revealing the truth about her marriage. I'm leaving my parents' house and figuring out what comes next after achieving my revenge.